Greetings, Tom Venditti here, also known as Brother Tomasio, an aspirant of the Third Order of the Discalced Carmelites. And I am here today on the very first program, let's put it, or broadcast or podcast, however you're hearing this. And it's basically Dear Bishop Coffey. And pretty much this is going to be a communication with a very, very dear friend and a very holy man and a very awesome, courageous man, Bishop Joseph L. Coffey, United States Military Archdiocese. And I was fortunate enough to be in the seminary with him for 2 years in Philadelphia. And here is a picture of Bishop Coffey celebrating Mass on the George Washington aircraft carrier. And Revelation 12:5 points to the man-child destined to rule the nations with an iron rod, born of the pregnant woman who was in travail. And bishopjoecoffey.com is the website where you could learn all about the amazing ministry of Bishop Joseph Coffey. So, dear Bishop Coffey, as you know, I'm a graduate of Franciscan University. I'm a former devotee of this particular icon. It's known as the San Damiano cross, or the San Damiano icon. And the Franciscans claim that Jesus came alive in this icon and spoke audibly to Francis of Assisi while Francis was drifting and searching and getting everybody mad at him because he didn't want to fight in the battles and he didn't want to help his dad and his mom. So he stumbled upon this icon, which was the original is 6 foot, and it had been left in basically a garbage pile, from what I could tell, and he was like mesmerized by it. And so, according to the story, he heard Jesus say, "Francis, look, as you can see, this church is in disrepair. Go and rebuild my church." And so that's what he did. And he went back to his father's house and he took tools and things that belonged to his dad and he sold them. And he had linens and things of that nature that his dad was very wealthy. And so he used his dad's things because he was a rightful heir. But the dad didn't approve of what Francis was doing with his money. And so he went to the bishop and said, "Listen, this has got to, we got to deal with this. He's out there claiming there's a talking Jesus, and this was the church that had been closed down by the bishop for whatever reason, and this cross was left in the chapel there. Francis stumbled upon it. I don't even know if he knew it was there or not. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, maybe he had heard rumors about it, but for some reason it was a chapel at one time active, and it had this large 6 foot artistic, I'm not going to say masterpiece, but certainly an artistic, the design, everything about it is very aesthetically pleasing until you get a closer look, So what we have here is a story in the church, a very legit story, and no one doubts that something happened to Francis for this cross. The question is, was it really Jesus, like the post-Vatican II Franciscans say, or was it maybe something else, which seems to be the opinion of the Pope at the time of St. Francis, okay? I wrote a book about this, I researched it, but the thing is, the Pope met with Francis, and everybody thought that this was, highly unlikely that the Pope would actually meet with Francis. But the Bishop of Assisi was there at that meeting. And so the history is here in this book. It's called the Damiano Demon. But when, Francis after his dad basically called him out, and they met with the bishop in Assisi, and the bishop said, go ahead, what do you have to say for yourself? And the bishop sided with his father and said, no, Francis, basically, what you're doing is wrong, okay? You can't take your dad's wealth and go and rebuild a church that we've already shut down. And I'm going to tell you why they shut it down. But the thing is, this was the time of the Inquisition. You're talking 1200s, guys. So this was the time of the Inquisition. So people were abandoning chapels, pieces of art, because if they were caught with certain contraband, they were going before the Inquisition court. So Francis found this, and he claims that it started talking to him. Now, the bishop and his father, nobody was buying it. The only people that were interested were like the destitute, the homeless, the people who, whatever, were kicked out of their town for whatever reason. Mentally ill, who knows? So Francis works with this type of, but his buddies start coming back from the war, and they go out to see what he's doing. And they catch wind of the talking Jesus or whatever, and they're in at that point. And Francis is firmly believing that Jesus is talking to him through that cross. So that it starts to get a little momentum, and then the church that chapel and the rehabilitation was upended by the people. They came and tore it all down again. So Francis was up against it. He couldn't figure this out. So the only thing a Catholic would do is go to the Pope and submit it to the highest ranking official of the church. And he went to Assisi with the brothers, his friends, and to get to see the Pope would have been a long shot. But he met with the Bishop of Assisi, who happened to be there, and they arranged it so that he was able to get in to see the Holy Father. And the Holy Father, had his impressions or whatever, ultimately decided to give Francis the blessing to live out his gospel lifestyle and evangelize, but not with the cross. The Pope didn't go for it, obviously, because right after that meeting, this cross was placed under lock and key. St. Clare ended up being the guardian of this thing, and nobody was allowed to see it for 700 years. And the Franciscans took the Tau cross as their official symbol. And Francis signed all his letters with the Tau cross, and the Pope was on board with the Tau cross. That was the spiritual crusade that was launched at that same time under the Tau cross. So this San Damiano was forgotten, deliberately forgotten. You might say, well, if Jesus was talking through it, why would the church do such a horrible thing? Well, that's the whole point. We don't know that it was Jesus because there is a pagan phallic symbol on the stomach here. So as a theologian myself, the theological question is, would God speak through a pagan phallic symbol, even though it's a artistic rendering of Jesus? There is a phallic symbol right smack in the center. The absolute scientifically designed center is the phallic symbol, which is, an erect penis and testicles on this image. So you got to ask yourself, would God allow his son to speak through a pagan phallic image of himself? This is a theological question, and my opinion is no, he wouldn't. Okay, and this is why we need some help here, because it's very offensive for a lot of people to think that God would legitimize a pagan phallic symbol by speaking through it. and the history doesn't support it. The history does not support the church's acceptance of this. Initially, Francis accepted it, but I doubt whether he did later, because he had enough to do. He didn't have time to worry about it. So he had enough to do evangelizing. So eventually the Clares in 1957, you're talking 1200 and something to 1957, hidden. 1957, the Pope was dying. Pope Pius, I believe it was the 12th, the one who, no, I'm sorry, I got my popes mixed up right now, but Pius the 11th, I believe, he was the one who was in charge during Hitler, and he's very controversial. And so, but anyway, he was sick. He was on his deathbed, and he ended up somehow giving permission for the Franciscans for the first time in history to publicly display it in the Basilica at St. Clare's in Assisi. So it was during Holy Week. So all of a sudden now, this forbidden icon is now public display during Holy Week. And then, you have Vatican II. And like I said, the Pope was dying. They caught the church at a very weak time. The Pope was, his last 2 years of his life, he was on his deathbed. So, Pope Pius the 12th, that was. So anyway, he was on his deathbed. This is wrong, what they did. In my opinion, it's wrong. And I've asked Franciscans, I've gone to their leaders, Father Malachi up at St. Francis. I've talked to Father Terence Henry. I've talked to Father Michael Scanlon. Father Scanlon supported my efforts to expose this because he wasn't aware of the pagan. It was his friend, Father Sam Tisi, T-O-R, that got the license to reproduce this image and mass produce it for a profit. And so this cross, in my opinion, is pagan. It's a mixture of paganism and Catholicism. And God says don't do that. From what I can tell from the Bible and our history and our traditions, we don't want to mix pagan, especially in worship. And this is what they do at Franciscan University. They have, this is everywhere you turn. It's in their confessionals, it's in their chapels, it's in their adoration, it's on their monstrances. It's everywhere you turn, you see this image. Now I'm going to give everybody a close-up of it. Just ask yourself, God who has, spoken through children at Fatima. We've heard of rosaries maybe that might get us a fragrance. There's miraculous things attached to icons and pictures and sacramentals. So you can't just say it's an innocent piece of artwork. This is depicting Jesus Christ, but it is depicting Jesus Christ in a way that has what we see here. And that's right in the center of the whole picture. And a phallic symbol is an erect penis with testicles, and it's based on the Greek and Roman god Priapus. And they would worship the male genitalia of Priapus, and the women would get pregnant. It was a fertility ritual. And there's images of, say, Zeus with a phallic symbol attached to it, and other deities. And this can all be found in Rape of the Soul. If you go to rapeofthesoul.com, they explain all this. This is a guy that testified before Congress on embedded imagery. So this is not anything you typically notice. You notice everything else, but you don't notice the front and center of the entire icon, which is right here. So this is part one, dear Bishop Coffey, because I'm going to go through the entire cross, because it's not just the phallic symbol that's questionable. There's other things that show me a mixture of Catholicism with maybe some type of mythology. This was Rome we're talking about, a suburb of Rome. And these guys were into all kinds of stuff. And we know that. Even to this day, you can find all kinds of historical evidence of that. So, dear Bishop Coffey, would you please help us? We're just Catholic people who want to do right by our children. And this has created a tremendous conflict in my own life, my own family. Nobody wants to believe that the church was duped on this. We're taught to believe the church cannot be duped. The church has to be right. Well, the church was right, but somebody undermined what the church had established for the last 700 years. So who's duping who is the big question, and what can we do about it? Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining our first segment here. So please check out the website, www.bishopjoecoffey.com. You'll be blessed like you can't believe. Bishop Coffey is a wonderful, wonderful holy priest and bishop, and so we're so blessed to have him. So take heart, everyone. God bless, and check out the website, bishopjoecoffey.com. And like I said, I did remove it from my house. I believe that the church should officially ban it from all sanctuaries, unless somebody can prove it otherwise. And I've begged them to show me some evidence that, anybody believed this story here. But they've made millions and millions of dollars. So that's really the bottom line. The Franciscans, who are supposed to be poverty, have hit a gold mine here. All right, God bless.